Right. Well, thank you, Wayne. Yes. Well, welcome everybody. Um, let's just see if I can share my screen. There we go. Right. Hopefully, you can all see my screen.
Yes.
Good. Right. Well, just a little bit of a bit of an intro, really, and a bit about me. This is my talk on Angular Material form fields. And we'll be looking at the Angular Material form field component and what it can do and what it can do for other components that are wrapped in an Angular Material form field. Just a bit about me, really. I've been an Angular developer since around about sort of 2016. I've done C# and .NET sort of prior to that. I'm Angular certified developer and the event organizer of the Angular community meetup here in the UK. And I've also got a few Microsoft exams as well. I also contribute to some of the open source stuff, Angular Material, Angular Flex Layout, and a few other Angular related libraries. So there's them ones. So in this topic, we're going to look at try not to sort of do a sort of death by PowerPoint. So it will be a sort of a coding thing. So I should be going through the coding examples on the screen. But we'll sort of just have a look at what is a map form field component, what a component does, and what form fields support, what components support the form field. And then we'll talk a bit about styling the form field and using various appearance options. And then we'll go through adding floating labels, required markers, and then sort of setting these up globally. And then sort of looking at prefixes and suffixes, adding hint labels, error messages, and sort of just lastly sort of touching on themes as well. So right, a map form field component is from the Angular Material Library, and we can wrap both native and Angular Material components like input, text area select, mat select, and mat chip list. There to sort of name a few. And there are some components that don't work with the map form field, and also I'll touch upon them as we sort of come across them. So, what does a map form field really do? I've set up this example here, and I'll go through this, and we'll just sort of populate some of these card components, so we can sort of get an idea of what's actually going on with each one. So, in its sort of simplest form, really, it's a map form field is really just a container. Oh no, I can't type. There we go. So default container. So we've set up a map form field. We have the appearance of legacy, and we're just in these examples. We're just using an input for most of them, and we just have a placeholder. The input set type is set to text. I've just got the autocomplete off to stop that from sort of throwing up stuff. And then we've got this mat input directive. Now we need this mat input directive so Angular Material can interact with the input itself. And as you can sort of see on the right here, we have this simple sort of input. And when I sort of select it, the name, I'm not sure if you can see that, but the name label then sort of becomes a floating label. And we'll talk more about floating labels as we go through. So that's really sort of in a nutshell what a mat form field is. So what we'll do is we'll have a look at some of the other appearances to start with and see what other things we can do with that. Now, there are 4 appearances that come with a mat form field. The default is legacy. And we can, if we don't specify the appearance here, it will default to legacy. So we don't need to sort of specify if we're just using legacy. And then 3. Next one along is standard. Standard is sort of a slightly updated version of legacy, but it's more in line with the next two, which is fill and outline. That's fill, and then we have the last one here will be outline. So if I then save that, we can then sort of see what's actually going on. So legacy is the one at the top, which is a very simple one we just had a look at. Standard, as I said, standard is a very simplified, sort of an updated version of legacy. And then we got fill and outline. So obviously the differences between fill and outline is we've got this sort of outline on the border, and we've got a sort of a backdrop to the text box there. We've still got the underline underneath. So they're the 4 styles. So we've got legacy, standard, fill, and outline. They're the 4 appearances. And right, I lost my place in my notes. Where are we? Yeah. So they're the 4 outlines. Right. So in the where am I? In the legacy, as I said, this is the default, and it's the default one if one isn't specified. And on the input, we put a placeholder. So on standard, the placeholder then becomes a floating label. If we put a placeholder on any of the other ones, it just remains as a label for it. And if we then sort of try and type into it, it then just gets overwritten until we take it out. Right. So the appearance options are. So let's have a look at the number 6. Let's have a look at that. But again, that's with the standard one with the placeholder, and then we get to 7. So, and I'll just put these ones in as well, and we'll just talk through them. We do. So on these ones, again, the legacy hasn't really sort of changed much at all, to be honest with you. So we've still got the placeholder there, and we get the floating label. To get a floating label on standard, fill, and outline, we need to put in a matte label. So that then behaves the same as the legacy. We can still put a placeholder in there as well if you wanted to put a placeholder in there as well. For instance, I'll just copy that in there and just quickly do that on the standard. If we do put a placeholder in there, and then basically it just remains as there as a placeholder as well. So you can have both, but only a matte label will be promoted to being a floating label. So that's kind of exactly the same for standard and fill and outline there. And sort of moving on to floating labels, we know about the floating label for legacy. These ones in there quickly. go back and talk to these. Right, so we've got some options with floating labels. As I said, legacy has always got a floating label, but we can actually now specify the various types of floating labels. So we can always, there are 3 types here. We can say always, auto, and never. And so this is the always one. So, and both sort of by definition of that, always. So when you go into, even before you go into it, the label is always floated at the top. So we can set that to be any of them. And then moving on to the auto, that just really is the default version of this. So whatever the default is for pick of the box in this case, or we've set this to auto, so whatever the default is, it will mimic that. So in this case, auto is effectively is the default, so it's always it's not floating until you click into it. So that's fairly straightforward there. And then moving down to never. Never is a little bit of a strange one. Because never is only ever valid for the legacy. And if I scroll down to my notes, yes, right. Never was only ever supported for legacy, and it's disabled for standard fill and outline. It was originally used for the floating label to emulate the behavior of a standard input placeholder, but now the form field supports floating labels and placeholders. So it never promotes the placeholder to a floating label. But as I said, that only ever works on legacy. So as you can see on standard outline and fill, it has absolutely no effect at all. And it's the input box works exactly the same. It's just on legacy, it just doesn't then float it. Personally, I've never actually come across any examples of anybody using never, but I guess it's there just in case. Right, moving on to required. Set these required. So I've set a couple of examples up here. So we have this, the actual input itself has got the required attribute on it. But we've got this other attribute on the form field itself. And this is the hide required marker. So maybe sometimes you might need to show that a field is required, and by default we have the little asterisk there. But it might be times when you want to sort of say, well, actually, I want to show that is a required field, but I want to use a different approach to it. So to hide that, you can use this hide required marker, and I've set the standard one there to hide it to be true. So it's required. But it's not showing the asterisk there, whereas the legacy one is showing the asterisk. So sort of going through these examples and stuff, and there's quite a few sort of options there. And if you've got a form or several forms that you want to sort of carry on and sort of style, or you get to a point in the application where actually we want to change the way that we're styling these input boxes and all our other components to be to include that as well. Sort of going through each form or whatever, it's a bit sort of cumbersome. So we can actually set these up globally. I'll include that. So at the moment, I've not specified anything on the form field um, or anything like that. I've set the required up. And if I go to, um, must be, if I then open up modules, it is actually set up. Right. So in the app modules, you can do this at a component level as well. So you don't have to have it, but it kind of makes more sense to be at a module level. So we have an option. I've set an options object up, and I've set the appearance to be auto. I'm sorry, the appearance to be outline, the floating label to be auto, and the hide required marker to be true. We also have then to set up our providers in the ng model itself, and then we import this mat form field value, and that comes from the Angular Material form field library. So we can import that, and then we just set the use value to be our options object. And by doing that, we can then set these up globally. So as you can see here, where's it gone? There we go. I've said the label says standard, but it's actually an outline, and the required marker is set to false. So if I go in and change that to say fill and always, and set that to false. So we can now see that particular text box has now got the asterisk on there to show that it's a required field. The appearance of it is fill, so that's then changed that. So it just makes it a lot easier if you're setting up an application that you're going to have lots of controls, and it's not just input controls. This could be sort of drop-down boxes or any other really sort of inputs and stuff that are supported by the mat form field. So you can then sort of style your application or change the style of your application literally within one sort of area rather than going through every form itself. Okay, right. Okay, let's get rid of that. So we can see. Okay, then moving on to prefixes and suffixes. Oh, no, I don't need that one. Right. So prefixes and suffixes. We've got the options there to set custom content, and these can be added to the prefix or suffix of content. And this content will be placed in visual containers that wrap the control. And this can be text or images, though it is recommended not to use text on fill and outline. Because the appearance and the label, they're just not floating in the same sort of lines, so they just won't line up. And I'll probably show you an example of that in a second. So we have the form field itself. This just set the legacy again, and then all we're doing really is, in this case, I'm just setting these a couple of span objects to say mat prefix and then mat suffix. And as we can see here, we can have the prefix or the suffix. So it then sits at the end of the component. We can still then sort of type into it as we would normally. And we can do that. We can also do it with icons as well. So here we've got a field set up with a icon at the end there, and I can click. So if I put in something in there, for example, and then I can then toggle that, and that'll switch that over. So just really sort of click, just a click event, just to toggle the visibility of that text. So we can use for icons for that. It doesn't have to be, as I say, just a slightly different there. We've got one here set up with a mat select. So we've got a mat form field wrapping a mat select, and we've got a mat icon. We've got a span with mat suffix. So we've got the icon on the end of this mat drop down. So we've got drop down there. So we can select that, but we've got this little icon on the right hand side there. So we can, so it's not just, sorry. So it's not just input boxes. As I said, we can sort of apply these to most of the components that we would need to use. And this example here is I think this is, yes, this is the reason why you don't use text on a outline or a fill input. As I said, it just won't line up. So there's absolutely no reason to it's just it, and it works, and it does exactly the same if you've used the mat suffix as well. So yeah, there's absolutely just be aware of that really. For those outline and fill, always use an icon rather than text. Okay, I think that is in the wrong place. So we moving on to hint messages. So components can have hint messages. So I'm not sure if you can see this. What I'll do is I will just get rid of that for a second and see whether that just brings that line up a bit. Yeah, so there you go. That's just a little bit easier to see. So there's two types of hint messages that we can apply to a mat form fields. The first one there is on the mat form field itself, and we've got a hint label attribute that we can apply to. Now, the thing with the hint label is that it is always left aligned, and we can't change that. The other one is so we're on this one here, where we take the hint label off, and we use the element called mat hint. Now a mat hint can now be specified, can now have a setting, so it defaults to the left, but we can now set it with using this align property and setting it to end, which will make it then right aligned. So that's hint labels. And I will just take out another one of these. So I'm getting towards the end of these at the moment. Error messages. We can do error messages. And error messages, obviously, if they're a required field and we don't get the required value or a value in there, then we get an error message. So we can then set the mat error, and then we do a check to see whether the form is valid. And then if it's not valid, then we can display this mat error on this component. If we also happen to have a mat hint, by the way, on these, so if we've got one of these with a mat hint, we can have a mat error on there as well. If the error is triggered, then the mat hint is hidden. So because you can only have the one line as it effectively underneath the component. So, and obviously once the error has been removed with proper with the expected sort of required fields, the validation for it, then the hint message will come back. So that's prefixes, suffixes, and hint labels and error messages. So just to talk a little bit about theming, I'm going to just cut that out of there and just lift this up a bit so we can sort of see it, because I think where I'm sharing the screen is a bit hidden. And AM33, right. So let's have a look. Right, yeah, so theming. When you're sort of setting up Angular material for the first time in a project, you will get the option to select a particular sort of a default theme. As it stands at the moment, there are 4 pre-built themes. The sort of deep purple, amber, indigo pink. There's a pink, blue, grey, and there's a purple, green. They're the 4 standard default themes. You can select one of them, or you can actually create your own theme. I won't sort of go into creating custom themes in there because it's quite a complex piece to set that up. So, but sort of selecting one of the default themes is fairly straightforward. And then you've got 3 elements there that you can then sort of change the color. So you've got primary, which is the primary color in this case, and then you get accent, which is like a muted, softer, to sort of highlight certain certain things, or just a sort of a bit of contrast and color sort of thing. And then you've got worn, and when the worn is usually red to indicate there's an issue. I think I set this up when I set this up. I think I had the purple, deep purple amber. I think it was. No, purple green. Sorry, it might be purple green. Actually, thinking about it, yes. So yeah, in this case, I've set this one up at the top here, and that's the default. So I haven't changed any color appearances on there, and it's as I click into it, it's then purple. If I then change the color of the map form field and specify the color property, and I change the color in this case to accent, that goes to the green. So yeah, it's the purple green we're using in this example. So there are, so you can then change, as I said, if I wanted to then change that to worn, and then when I click on it, it becomes red. So that's where we are with that. So yeah, there are other bits and pieces you can do with the theme. You can sort of change the color of the required marker. That's an option there to do. And it's a case of just setting up some CSS to set that up. And there's a couple of CSS elements that we can sort of set up to change the various colors of the required marker, for instance. And changing the other parts of the theme can change the cursor colors and the other primary colors. But you have only got those those sort of three sort of variables, as it were, to play with. You can change it. You can set up, if you're creating a custom theme, you can set it up to have a dark theme as well as a light theme, for instance. So, but with the 4 default ones, that is all you get. And yeah, that's pretty much me on where I've got with Angular material form fields. I'll stop sharing at the moment and see if we have any questions.
Thanks. Thank you, Duncan. So just I think the question would be, I think it was a very nifty way of how you are using the mat form fields options, where you created, I think you just created like an object that had, I think it's float level, appearance, and I can't remember the other one.
Oh yeah. The required,
Yeah. So I think that was a very nifty way. I personally didn't know how to do that one. Like I just knew like just override it on the mat form field itself. But that was a very neat, and it's not a neat trick. But I think it's a cleaner way of setting what exactly you need, which is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it just sort of, especially if you've got I mean, if you've only got 1 or 2 components on your form and stuff, then it's not so much of a problem. But if you've got quite a big application or whatever, you don't want to be doing that on every form.
Yeah. So for probably people who might be a bit skeptical when it comes to using libraries that basically do some of these things, like see like how you do a form, and then you have some set of like validation and all. You know, there are those people who might just want to, I don't know, do everything by themselves.
Yeah.
What kind of probably like a tip you would give to those people who are probably skeptical using things like Angular material?
Yeah, I mean, Angular material is quite a big, a very big library. But I would certainly recommend giving it a go. It's not, yes, to start. I mean, it's like most things. There's always a learning curve with it. And yeah, it takes a little while to sort of become familiar with everything in there. But I don't think it's any more complicated than the other ones that are around there, like Tailwind and Bootstrap and stuff. I don't think it's any more complicated than them. So, yeah, no, I would certainly recommend sort of going for the Angular material library, especially with an Angular project, if that's because that they kind of sort of work in harmony. And so yeah, so I would certainly sort of recommend if you've got the choice or the chance of using it, I would certainly sort of recommend using it.
So how, like probably just asking you, how often have you been using mat form fields or just Angular material in general? Like, do you use it for every project?
I've used it for pretty much every project I've done. I am currently working in a. Having said that, I am currently working on a project at the moment that's using Bootstrap, but that's a legacy app, and yeah, so I've got hands are tied on that one. But yeah, for every other project I've done, I've always used the map for the Angular material stuff. So, and one of the things I'm sort of trying to put together, and hopefully it will be released soon, is a complete course on Angular material. So, so hopefully there, so yeah, sort of help people sort of try and pick it up and learn a bit more about it.
I think pretty much I had. Anyone else? If you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and just ask any question. Or maybe just to ask, has anyone here like extensively worked with Matform field? Like, is there something that you probably didn't know about and like you've learned it here today? Like anyone? Just unmute yourself, by the way. Okay. All right. I think there was a time I had like conversation with Esther. Esther, have you like did you get to see something that you've never seen before when it came to Angular material in general? Like you've seen anything new here today? Yeah, Esther. Yeah, I don't think we can hear you, but okay. Probably having issues with the mic. But yeah, but anyway, yeah, is anyone else has a question probably or a comment to say? Yeah, probably first continue to wait. Oh yeah, hi Edwina. Want to say something?
Hi. Hi, can you hear me?
Hi.
Yes, we can hear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I've learned something new, the prefix and suffix, and actually about the what was this, appearances. That was really new to me, and I'm glad I joined the meeting. I learned that. Yes, and I would
good.
like to say thank you. Yes.
That's okay. Thank you. What I can do is I can send you the slides for this and the GitHub repo for it if anybody's interested.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I can just put it up also on our YouTube channel when we upload the video. We just post the links in the description.
Yeah, yeah. I'll email that all across to you, Wayne.
All right, sure. Yeah. Anyone else has a comment or a question? Okay. Yeah, Esther. I suppose still having mic issues, and no worries. But anyway, from a personal perspective, having worked with Angular material, I think Angular material in itself is a blessing, I'd say, for developers. And the reason is because it's got like amazing functionalities, things to do with like select options and whatever else. And uh, working with the company I work with, Kobiro, I've gotten to like really understand, especially like smart form fields and like how they work and all that, like behind the scenes. How can you probably tweak them to do what you want them to do, while at the same time even like working it on personal projects, trying to see how can I style them on my own and all that. You know, there's that thing of you can do style them on a general level, but then I also learned that you can still do it on your in that particular component. The problem with, I think some of the issues or the challenges that come with material is that you have to style it or override the styling on the root level, which is like in the style.scss file. But then when coming to learn about so I think it's encapsulation, was able to now understand like, okay, so if I do encapsulate it, I need to make sure that I also create some sort of like a custom class in this particular component so that it doesn't leak out to the whole application. And getting to know that I can use my theming that I need, for example, for things to do with like with the icon colors, like the form field outline and all that. It's pretty amazing for me on a personal level. So I think as go on.
No, I was just gonna say, I'm very enthusiastic when it comes to Angular Material. I think it is a great library, and there's some great things coming through to it with the MDC stuff and the accessibility stuff coming through in version 14. So there's some really good stuff and it's probably got more accessibility control as well than most of the other libraries have as well. So it's a big focus at the moment at Google on the accessibility side of things, and obviously with changing over to the MVC format as well, that will there's some great things coming for Angular Material in the future.
Thank you very much. If anyone doesn't have any question or a comment, I'd like to say a big thank you on behalf of the whole community. Thank you, Duncan, for taking the time.
No, thank you very much.
This session. Yeah. And if you guys would like to reach out to Duncan, he'll share with me his socials, and then you can always reach out to him. If you look also on the poster, I put also his socials at Duncan Faulkner. And if you will be interested in reaching out to him, probably have any additional questions, please do reach out. And
please do.
Any final words, Duncan?
No, just to say thank you very much for inviting me. And it's been a real eventful evening. So thank you very much. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyway, thank you guys. Again, the video will be available to everyone by tomorrow afternoon. So be sure to just check out our YouTube channel in case. And thank you once again, Duncan. Thank you, everyone, and wishing you all a good evening and a good day for those who probably are not within our time zone.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.